There's a kind of trader the internet never talks about. He doesn't blow up in one dramatic move. He bleeds slowly, trade by trade, click by click, not from lack of knowledge, but from battles he never knew he was fighting. Not with the market, but with himself. You see, every chart is a mirror. Every impulsive entry, every revenge trade, every moment of hesitation, it's not just strategy, it's psychology, a reflection of hidden fears, old wounds, and the silent shadows we carry to the screen. And until we name those shadows, they will keep trading for us. So if you've ever felt like there's a part of you sabotaging your own success, this video isn't just for your trades. It's for your transformation. You sit down at your desk, the charts are open, candles moving like waves on glass. You tell yourself it's time to focus, time to follow the plan, time to be disciplined. But something inside you already feels off. You can't explain it. It's subtle, like a sound just below hearing, like a shadow in your peripheral vision. You think you're analyzing the market, but what if, without realizing it, the market is analyzing you? What if this isn't just a game of technicals? What if it's a mirror and the chart is just the reflection? There's a reason trading can feel like psychological torture, because every line you draw, every trade you place, every hesitation you feel, it's not just coming from your system, it's coming from inside you, from the beliefs you carry, from the emotions you hide, from the past you haven't fully faced. The market, in all its cold, chaotic indifference, becomes a stage. And every day you step into the arena, bringing your fears, your ego, your need to prove something, masked as logic. And at first, you don't notice. You think the missed entry was about timing. You think the early exit was just about risk control. You blame the news, the broker, the setup, the spread. But deep down, you know better. You can feel it in your gut that the real problem isn't out there, it's in here. Picture this. You walk into a maze, but it's not built of stone, it's built of mirrors. And at first, you think the goal is to find the way out, to navigate your edge, to master your system. But soon you realize something's wrong. The reflections are distorted. One mirror shows confidence, another shows fear, another flashes a younger version of you, insecure, hungry for validation. You're not lost in a maze of price action, you're lost in a maze of yourself. Each trade becomes a test of identity. One moment, you're the strategist, clear, focused, sharp. Then something shifts. One candle moves against you. A small wave of doubt crashes through your chest, and suddenly, the trader behind the screen isn't the same man who built the plan. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious self, the part of you try to hide, suppress, deny. But the market doesn't care what you suppress. The market reflects it. You see, the real market doesn't just move in patterns. It pulls patterns out of you. It doesn't just trigger stops, it triggers stories, stories you didn't know you were still living. I once knew a trader, smart, systematic, checklist driven. He had everything dialed in, risk, precise, entries, back-tested, journaling, obsessive. But his P&L, flat, no growth, no consistency, just endless cycles of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. And every time we spoke, he had a reason. The market's slow this week. FOMC threw it off. Maybe I need to refine my entry criteria. Until one day, something changed. He paused. He looked down at his journal and he wrote, almost without thinking, "What if I don't actually believe I deserve to win?" That sentence hit him harder than any drawdown. Because it wasn't a technical problem. It was a belief problem. And that belief had been trading for him all along. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In trading, we call it bad luck. Market conditions, a broken setup. But what if it was never the market? What if it was always you? You think trading is about predicting the next move. But most traders can read price. What they can't read is themselves. They can't see the emotion behind the logic, the story behind the strategy, the identity behind the execution. So let me ask you, who is sitting at the desk when you open your charts? Is it the disciplined professional or the orphan child still seeking approval? The perfectionist terrified of failure, the gambler chasing dopamine? Because if you never ask that question, if you never pause to check the mirror, you'll keep trying to fix your system, when what really needs fixing is your self-awareness. The market is the mirror, your P&L is the reflection, and your behavior is the brush painting the outcome. The scariest part? That you might be doing everything right, but it's the wrong version of you making the decisions. And as long as that version, the insecure, the wounded, the reactive version, stays invisible, he will keep trading for you. This is the mirror maze. It's not here to trap you, it's here to reveal you. So the next time you feel off, when you hesitate, when you rush, when you size up impulsively, don't just ask, what is the market doing? Ask, who's trading right now? Because that's how you stop running in circles and start walking through the mirror. Most traders think they're in control until they're not, until they press buy on a setup that doesn't meet their rules, until they double their size on a random Tuesday morning, until they skip journaling after a bad week because it hurts too much to see the truth. And when it all unravels, they say the same thing: I don't know what happened. But deep down, they do. They just can't name it, because the thing sabotaging them is invisible. Here's the uncomfortable truth most traders never face. There are two traders inside you: the one you want to be, calm, disciplined, rational, and the one you try to ignore, impulsive, emotional, wounded. The one who acts when you're tired or angry or scared, the one who doesn't follow the rules because he's not interested in trading, he's interested in relief. Carl Jung called this your unconscious shadow, the part of your psyche that you reject, disown, or bury, the part that doesn't vanish, but waits quietly until your guard is down. And when that moment comes, he doesn't ask for permission. He just grabs the mouse. I know this enemy intimately. I've lost trades to him. I've lost months of progress to him. I've stared at the screen, watching myself spiral, knowing exactly what I was doing and still doing it. I thought I was a disciplined trader. I had the plan, the risk rules, the daily routine. But every few months, like clockwork, I'd have a catastrophic day, a day where I gave back everything. 3 months of gains gone in 3 hours. And every time I swore, never again, until it happened again. It wasn't until I started tracking my emotions, not just my trades, that I began to see the pattern. Not in the market, in me. These blowups didn't come from bad setups. They came from bad internal states, from arguments with my partner, from feelings of inadequacy, from moments where I felt small, unimportant, unseen. And suddenly the market became my boxing ring, a place to reclaim control, to prove something, to fight shadows from my personal life with leverage. That's the invisible enemy, the part of you that hides beneath spreadsheets and setups, the part that doesn't care about your edge. It only cares about your ego. Let's get brutally honest for a second. Have you ever broken your rules, not because of the chart, but because something inside you needed to feel better? Maybe you felt ignored, so you sized up to feel powerful. Maybe you felt rejected, so you held a loser, trying to prove you were still right. Maybe you lost, and then you needed to win, not for your plan, but for your pride. That wasn't strategy, that was survival. And survival trading is the most dangerous trading there is. You can't outsmart this enemy. You can't backtest him away. You can't journal him into submission, because he doesn't operate through logic. He operates through emotion. He doesn't care about win rates. He cares about identity, about proving that you're good enough, smart enough, in control. But trading isn't where we go to be in control. It's where we go to accept uncertainty. And your shadow, your invisible enemy, hates that truth. So he reacts. He lashes out. He takes over. Jung wrote, what you resist persists. So if you pretend this emotional trader doesn't exist, he doesn't disappear. He just waits in silence until your next moment of weakness. Then he trades for you. I worked with a trader once. Let's call him Eli. Flawless systems, color-coded journals, exact stop placement, never risked more than 1%. But once a month, he'd have a meltdown trade, a trade that blew up everything. He couldn't explain it. Until one day, during a call, I asked, what happened right before that trade? He paused, then laughed nervously. I had a fight with my dad that morning. He said I was wasting my life playing pretend with charts. And just like that, it clicked. The trade wasn't a mistake. It was a rebellion. His shadow, the wounded son who never felt good enough, stepped forward and said, I'll show you. Watch me win big. But the market doesn't care about your childhood. It only reflects it. So what do? How do we face an enemy we can't see? We give him a name. We learn his voice. We track his patterns. We build a mirror sharp enough to catch him in the act. Because once you can see the invisible trader inside you, he's no longer in control. You are. Here's a simple practice. Next time you feel the urge to break your rules, stop. Close your eyes and ask, who wants this trade? Is it your plan or your pain? Because here's the truth. Until you recognize who's really clicking the button, you're not trading the markets. You're trading your shadows. And shadows don't care about profit. They care about protection. They trade not to win, but to survive. So the next time you say, I don't know what happened, don't look at the chart. Look in the mirror because you weren't trading alone. Not all pain screams, some pain whispers. Some pain doesn't come from a crash, but from a pattern that repeats so quietly you barely notice it stealing your edge. You know the one I'm talking about. It starts with a small loss, then a rationalization, then a revenge trade you know you shouldn't take, but you take it anyway because you're due. And before you even realize it, you're back at zero. Again, this is the loop. The emotional hamster wheel that keeps you trading in circles, never gaining real ground. It's not about the market anymore. It's about the parts of you that are still trying to win battles from the past on a battlefield that doesn't care. Let me tell you a truth. I lived for 2 years. Every Monday, I woke up with discipline. I had my checklist, I had my mindset, I had my plan. But by Wednesday, I was overtrading. By Friday, I was journaling. Again, about how next week will be different. The pattern became so predictable, I could have backtested my own downfall. Win, overconfidence, loss, frustration, revenge trade, spiral, reset, over and over, like a heartbeat monitor of a trader dying slowly. And the scariest part, it didn't feel like sabotage. It felt normal because when a loop becomes familiar, it becomes invisible. You see, most traders don't fail from lack of knowledge. They fail from emotional inertia, a hidden belief, a wound, a fear that was never healed, that keeps repeating itself through your trades like a ghost in the code. And no amount of technical precision can fix what your unconscious is dead set on repeating. I worked with a trader named Lena, brilliant, disciplined, technically flawless, but she could never hold a winner, not out of fear, but guilt. Every time she started to profit, she'd act too early, even when her system screamed, hold. One day, she said something I'll never forget. I start to feel guilty when I'm right, like I'm doing something wrong by winning. Turns out her father, a strict militant man, used to say, don't get cocky. The second you feel smart, you lose. So her loop wasn't about execution. It was about permission, the unconscious belief that I don't deserve to win. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In trading, fate feels like this strange cycle you can't break. But it's not fate. It's an unspoken agreement with your own pain. Let's break down the loop piece by piece. It starts with emotional misalignment, a feeling you don't recognize. Maybe you're frustrated, maybe you're ashamed, maybe you just want to get it over with. But instead of acknowledging it, you click, you enter the trade. Not from strategy, from state. And here's the thing. Every loop starts with a state shift, from present to reactive, from grounded to triggered, from trader to child. So how do you know when you're in the loop? Watch for the twitch, that feeling in your chest, that voice in your head that says, just get it back, just one more, fix it. That's not your plan speaking. That's your wound. And the longer you ignore it, the more the loop becomes your identity. Here's the terrifying part. If your self-image is built around being the struggler, the comeback story, the underdog, then even success will feel unfamiliar and you'll give it back because some part of you doesn't know how to exist outside the loop. I saw this firsthand with a trader named Jonah. Every time he had a green streak, he'd find a way to lose it. Not out of recklessness, but out of emotional gravity. He was addicted to the cycle because in the pain, he knew who he was. He wasn't afraid of failure. He was afraid of freedom. Mark Douglas once wrote, we live in a loop of expectation, disappointment, and emotional reinforcement until we rewrite the code. That's what breaking the loop really is. Not force, not discipline, but awareness. You can't fight what you don't see. You can't rewrite what you haven't read. So here's your process. Start small. After every trade, don't just write the numbers. Write the feeling. What triggered you? What thought came before the click? What were you trying to avoid or prove? Then zoom out. Weekly, monthly. Look not for price patterns, but you patterns. Because if the same emotional arc is showing up in every cycle, you're not just trading setups, you're trading trauma. And here's the good news. Once you name the loop, you can step outside of it. And when you do, you'll start to see the moments where it usually begins. The early signal, the state shift, the silent voice inside saying, "You're not enough unless you win this." When you hear that voice, you don't trade. You pause, you breathe, you listen, because that's your shadow trying to trade for love or validation or revenge. And the market doesn't give any of those. It only gives you your reflection. So ask yourself, is this a strategy or a story I'm trapped in? Because once you realize your loop isn't a flaw, it's a pattern. You've already started to break it. There's a moment right before disaster where everything goes still. You see the chart clearly. You know the setup isn't there. You feel the risk is too high. And then click. Just like that, it's done. The trade you knew you shouldn't take is live. That wasn't you. Not the version of you that journals, not the one who backtests, not the one who's been training for this moment. That was someone else, someone who's been watching silently from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to take control. Carl Jung called it the shadow self, the collection of traits we suppress, reject, or pretend don't exist. The impulsive, the arrogant, the insecure, the desperate, the parts of you that don't fit your idea of who you should be. So you exile them, but they don't disappear. They wait. And in trading, when money's on the line, when the ego is vulnerable, when the market doesn't obey, the shadow steps in. Most traders think they're rational machines, that they're executing clean, objective decisions. But they've never met their shadow in live market conditions. They've never watched themselves chase a candle like a gambler, or hold a loser for hours because they just know it'll turn, or move a stop 3 times on a sinking ship because taking a loss would feel like death. I once worked with a trader, a PhD in mathematics, brilliant, built his own algo, managed money for institutions, bulletproof on paper, but every month, without fail, he'd blow 5 figures in a single day. When I asked what happened, he always said, "I don't know what came over me." But nothing came over him. It came from within him, a part of him that had never been acknowledged, a part that didn't care about stats or systems or logic. Only one thing mattered to this part. Don't feel small. Your shadow doesn't care about your edge. It cares about your identity. It remembers being laughed at, rejected, dismissed. It remembers the day someone made you feel powerless and decided that would never happen again. So when pressure rises in the market, the shadow doesn't want to execute the plan. It wants revenge. But here's the paradox. The more you try to suppress the shadow, the more power it gains. It doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It sharpens. It studies your system. It watches your stress. It learns your weak points. And when you're tired or angry or euphoric, it takes the wheel. Not to win, but to be seen. Because the shadow doesn't want profit. It wants to feel like it matters. That's what makes it so dangerous. You won't recognize it in the moment. It won't feel like sabotage. It'll feel like instinct, like just one more trade. Like, I need to get it back. Like, this is the one. And the moment you believe it, you're no longer the trader, you're the puppet. Mark Douglas didn't use the word shadow, but he described it perfectly. The part of you that avoids pain is the same part that prevents your growth. Because the shadow isn't evil, it's protective, primitive, emotional. It's the child who was embarrassed in front of a classroom, the teen who wasn't enough, the adult who still hasn't forgiven himself for falling short. And when the market feels threatening, the shadow trades, not for success, but for safety. So what do? How do you fight a version of yourself that lives in silence? You don't fight it. You see it. You name it. You feel when it enters the room, because the moment you see your shadow, you have a choice. I remember one day, mid-session, when I felt the shift. I was up, calm, clear. Then something small triggered me. A rejection email, a personal comment, something insignificant on the surface, but it hit deep, and a voice inside me said, "Prove them wrong. Make them regret doubting you. Take the trade. Show them." My hand moved toward the mouse, but this time I paused. I whispered out loud, "I see you. I know what you're trying to do. You want to feel powerful again, but this isn't the way." And I closed the platform. That was the first time I chose not to trade, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because once you bring the shadow into the light, it can't control you the same way. It loses its grip. It becomes data. It becomes signal. You stop being a slave to it and start becoming a guide for it. That's the beginning of integration. Jung called this individuation, the process of uniting all parts of yourself into one clear conscious identity, not perfection, wholeness. So let me ask you, what version of you has been trading lately? The professional or the one who needs to prove something? The calm strategist or the wounded child looking to feel enough? Because the market doesn't care who's at the terminal. But your results, they always do. If you want to become consistent, you must first become whole. And wholeness begins with seeing the shadow, naming it, not as the enemy, but as the unacknowledged voice that's been crying out through every impulsive trade. You don't need to eliminate the shadow, you need to bring it home. The next time you click that button, pause, breathe, and ask, who's trading right now? If it's the shadow, invite him to speak, then choose differently. That's not weakness, that's mastery. The first time you win big, something happens, not just in your account, but in your brain. A flash, a rush, a hit of dopamine so sharp, so pure, it lights you up from the inside out. And in that moment, you're hooked, not on the market, not on the system, on the feeling. You tell yourself it's about strategy, about probability, about mastering risk. But somewhere along the way, trading stopped being about building wealth and started being about chasing a high. You've crossed an invisible line. The screen still looks the same. The indicators are still there. The setup seems familiar. But under the surface, you're not trading logic anymore. You're trading chemistry. And that chemistry, it doesn't care about rules. It doesn't care about your plan. It only wants the rush again. That's the nature of dopamine, the molecule of anticipation, not satisfaction. It's not the win that gets you addicted. It's the possibility of the next one. The market becomes your casino. Every setup, a slot machine, every chart, a roulette wheel of emotional payoff, and worst of all, you can't tell when it happens because it doesn't look chaotic. It looks like just one more trade. I worked with a trader named Jonah. Brilliant, consistent, slow and steady equity curve until he hit a massive win on a gut feeling trade. It wasn't in his plan. It broke all his rules, but it paid. Big. That day changed everything. Not because he made money, but because his brain learned something dangerous. Impulse equals reward. From that day forward, he was never the same. No win felt big enough unless it matched that one. He became erratic, over-leveraged, unstable, and every time he tried to go back to his system, he felt bored because strategy couldn't compete with the thrill. He wasn't trading anymore. He was chasing a ghost. That's the dopamine gamble. And it's silent. It wears a mask. It sounds like confidence. It feels like momentum, but it's not discipline. It's addiction. And the market? It's the perfect supplier. Instant feedback, high stakes, endless opportunities to feel alive. But here's the catch. The market was never built to make you feel good. It doesn't care about your chemistry. It doesn't care about your cravings. It doesn't even care about your results. It only reflects your state. And if that state is chemically hijacked, your strategy won't save you. Mark Douglas said, when you start expecting the market to make you feel good, you surrender your edge. Because now you're no longer trading what you see, you're trading what you want to feel. And that makes you blind. Here's how it works. You win, and dopamine spikes. Your brain marks that win as important, but it doesn't mark the logic. It marks the emotion. So the next time you feel flat, tired, lonely, insignificant, your brain remembers the fastest way to feel alive, another trade. Not because the setup is, but because the hit is. It gets worse. Because when you lose, dopamine crashes hard. Now you're not just down money, you're down meaning. So what do? You trade again. Not from clarity, but from withdrawal. This is the loop most traders never talk about because it doesn't look like gambling. It looks like overtrading. It looks like inconsistency. It looks like burnout. But deep down, it's a chemical addiction to feeling something. The shadow loves dopamine because it bypasses reason. It doesn't argue, it acts. And when it acts, it always whispers the same lies. Double the size. You're on a street, deserve this. Just one more. And like any addict, you justify. You call it intuition. You call it flow. You call it reading price action. But deep down, you know what it is. Here's how you know the dopamine trade is running the show. You win and feel high, not calm. You lose and feel worthless, not neutral. You break your rules only after a big win or a big loss. You enter trades not to follow the plan, but to feel better. That's the chemistry talking, not the trader. Carl Jung once said, "What you do not make conscious will rule your life." So, what's the solution? Consciousness. You don't fight the dopamine loop by forcing discipline, you break it by rewiring the relationship. That means redefining the win, not as a thrill, but as a neutral event. That means seeing the loss not as failure, but as feedback. It means trading not to feel better, but to see clearer. You don't need to suppress the part of you that wants the hit. You need to understand it. Where does it come from? What part of you needs to feel significant fast? What part of you feels empty without validation? Because dopamine isn't the problem, it's biology. The problem is when it runs the show, when the shadow uses it as leverage. So here's a practice. After your next big win, don't trade again. Log off. Feel the craving rise. Sit with it. Let it burn. Because the more you can sit in the fire, the less control it has. That's not weakness. That's rewiring. So ask yourself, am I trading to grow or trading to feel something? Because if it's the second, you're not in a strategy, you're in a spiral. And the only way out is awareness. There's a kind of loss in trading that doesn't show up on your statement. It's not the red number, not the P&L drop, not even the missed win. It's the moment you cut a winner too early, even though everything said to hold. Not because the market turned, not because your system told you to, but because something deep inside whispered, you don't deserve this. Most traders think their biggest enemy is fear or greed or lack of knowledge. But sometimes it's shame. You followed your plan, you waited for the setup, you entered with discipline, and it worked. The trade moved in your favor, it was going your way. But just as profit began to grow, something inside you tightened. A quiet anxiety rose in your chest, a pressure, a guilt, and so you exited. Too early. Again. Why? Not because of risk, not because of logic, but because winning, truly winning, felt unsafe, felt wrong, felt unfamiliar. That's not a strategy flaw. That's a wound. And that wound doesn't belong to the adult trader. It belongs to someone younger, someone smaller, someone still living inside you. This is the inner child's trade. It's not about entries or exits or execution. It's about the version of you that learned a long time ago that love was conditional, that success was dangerous, that being seen meant being punished. I worked with a trader named Lena, precise, talented, but she never held her winners. She would enter a perfect trade, watch it move into profit, and then exit early almost every time. When I asked why, she said, I start to feel guilty when I'm right, like I'm not supposed to be. That guilt wasn't about the market, it was about memory. Her father, a high-ranking military officer, had a rule: don't get cocky. Any display of pride, confidence, or celebration was punished. So her subconscious learned success equals shame. And now, decades later, that belief still clicked the mouse. Carl Jung said, the inner child is not childish. It's the most vulnerable part of our psyche. And when that part trades, it doesn't want profit. It wants love, approval, safety, or at the very least, to avoid rejection. This is why some of your trades make no sense on paper, why you give back your gains, why you hesitate on entries you know are valid, why you cut a winner right before it runs, or hold a loser just long enough to prove something. It's not random, it's not stupidity, it's survival. Because when the inner child is at the terminal, you're not trading for growth, you're trading for permission. Think back. What did success mean in your childhood? What did money mean? What did risk mean? Were you told to be careful, to stay small, to not be selfish? Did your wins get celebrated or dismissed? Did your losses mean punishment or rejection? Because those emotional patterns didn't disappear. They just went underground. And now, when you're trading real money, they reemerge. Most traders don't lose because they lack skill. They lose because they haven't dealt with the part of themselves that's afraid of success. Success carries weight. It demands identity. And if your self-concept says, I'm average, I'm not enough, I'm not built for this, then every time you start to exceed that, you'll sabotage it. Not consciously, but compulsively. Mark Douglas wrote, your trading results are a direct reflection of your belief system. And if your belief system says you're only valuable when you struggle, then success will feel like betrayal, and you'll trade yourself back to where it feels right. I've seen it in 1,000 different forms. The trader who avoids big wins because he's afraid of what comes after, the one who can't stop revenge trading, not because of ego, but because he feels invisible. The one who keeps resetting his account because he feels like a fraud when he's profitable. And when you dig deep enough, it always traces back to one thing. The trade isn't about the chart, it's about childhood. So what do? You start by seeing it, not judging it, not shaming it, just recognizing it. That voice inside saying, don't celebrate, don't mess it up, they're watching you. That's not the market talking, that's memory. So here's a practice. After your next exit, especially if it felt rushed or emotional, review, ask yourself, who made that decision? Was it the strategist or the child? What was I hoping to feel or hoping to avoid? Write it down, trace it, honor it, because that part of you is not the enemy. It's the younger version of you, still trying to earn a sense of worth. But here's the truth. The market doesn't give love. It only gives feedback. And if you're trading for validation, you'll always be disappointed because wins won't fill the wound and losses will reopen it. The path forward, you learn to parent your inner trader. You become the voice that says, it's okay to win. You don't need to prove anything. You're allowed to succeed and be safe. Trading from that place, from inner alignment instead of inner fear, that's when everything changes. That's when trades become clean, neutral, precise, because now you're not trading to be enough. You already are. Two traders look at the exact same chart, same time frame, same candle, same price action. One sees a breakout, the other sees a bull trap. They both act. One wins, one loses. And each walks away thinking, I was right. But neither of them saw the truth. They saw their beliefs. We don't trade the market. We trade our expectations of the market, filtered through layers of past experiences, emotional wounds, inherited rules, and unconscious narratives. And that filter? It colors everything, the entry, the exit, the size, the story we tell ourselves about the trade. Most traders think they're seeing reality, but what they're actually seeing is themselves. Carl Jung said, your perception of the world is a reflection of your inner world. That applies to life, and it applies with brutal precision to trading, because if your inner world is filled with scarcity, you'll see every setup as a risk. If it's filled with desperation, you'll see every candle as a chance to prove yourself. If it's filled with doubt, you'll hesitate even when your plan is clear. Let me tell you a story. There was a trader I worked with named Khalid, sharp, calm, brilliant with pattern recognition, but he struggled to pull the trigger, always hesitating, always second guessing. He would mark the setup hours in advance, watch it unfold perfectly, and then freeze. When I asked him what stopped him, he said, I don't know. I just get this tightness in my chest, like I'll regret it no matter what. So I asked him to do something most traders never think to do. Write down every belief he held about money. The result? Big money is dangerous. Rich people are corrupt. If I get too successful, I'll lose it all. People who take risks hurt others. Turns out his grandfather lost everything in a crash during the 1980s. It destroyed the family business, and that story, though never explicitly told, became the operating system Khalid traded from. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of becoming the villain, and no system could override that belief, because beliefs always win, silently, invisibly. They sit behind the chart, pulling the strings. This is what I call the belief filter. It's the lens through which you interpret risk. It's the silent narrator telling you what a red candle means or what a sideways market is trying to say. And most of us never question it because we mistake our beliefs for truth. I had my own version. For years, I believed if I make money too quickly, I'll lose it just as fast. That belief came from my mother. She told me the story over and over about how her brother made a fortune, then lost everything in a single bad investment. She'd say, money that comes fast goes fast. And I internalized it. So every time I had a great trading week, I would unconsciously find a way to give it back. Not because of volatility, not because of poor analysis, because my identity wasn't calibrated for success. It was calibrated for equilibrium, even if that meant failure. That's the danger of unconscious beliefs. They don't just shape what you see, they shape what you're allowed to keep. Mark Douglas said, we are not the victims of the market. We are victims of our own unexamined beliefs. And those beliefs, they rarely come from you. They come from family, culture, religion, childhood moments of punishment or praise, silent rules about what it means to take risk, to succeed, to be worthy. They get installed before you ever touch a chart, and they become the framework you unconsciously trade from. So, how do you start to break free? You start by becoming aware, not of price, but of the story you've been telling yourself about price. Here are the questions I give every trader I coach. What do I believe about money? Where did that belief come from? Is it even mine? Does it serve me in this game or sabotage me? Because beliefs are not facts. They are emotional contracts we signed a long time ago, usually when we had no idea we were signing anything. And the longer they go unchallenged, the more they become identity. That's when it gets dangerous because now you're no longer just saying, I had a losing week. You're saying, I am a losing trader. You start to fuse your self-worth with your P&L. And when that happens, you're no longer trading setups, you're trading validation. But what if you could step back, pull the lens from your eye and examine it? What if you could change the belief filter, not by force, but by choice? Because once you see a belief clearly, you can test it. Is it real? Is it true? Or is it just old programming still running the show? When you realize that, you take back power. You stop reacting, you start responding, you stop proving, you start observing. And that's when everything changes. The charts don't change, the market doesn't get easier, but your relationship to it does. You stop needing the win, you stop fearing the loss. You stop confusing your past with your potential. You start seeing the market not through fear, but through freedom. So here's your challenge. Before your next trade, ask, what belief is driving this decision? Is it clarity or conditioning? Is it me or my history? Because once you can answer that, you stop being a prisoner of the past and you start becoming the trader you were meant to be. You sit down at your desk, charts open, coffee warm, strategy in mind, journal by your side. You tell yourself, it's just me now, focused, ready, present. But what if that's not true? What if you're not the only one trading? What if behind every trade, behind every entry and exit, there's a cast of inner characters pulling your decisions in different directions? This isn't metaphor. This is psychology. Carl Jung called them archetypes. Universal identities that live within each of us. They're not roles you play, they're parts of your mind, parts that come alive in specific moments, especially under pressure. And in trading, they're always on stage. Let me introduce you to a few of them. The warrior, the focused executor, calm, tactical, present. He trades the plan, follows the edge, respects the rules. He knows that discipline is strength and that real power comes from stillness. The warrior enters when the setup aligns. He sizes appropriately, he journals the trade, and he walks away, whether it wins or loses, with peace. He's the trader you want to be, but he's not always the one who shows up. The fool, the dopamine junkie, the thrill seeker, the part of you who trades not to win, but to feel. He jumps into setups early, doubles down after losses, chases breakouts with no confirmation, and always thinks, this one's different. The fool hates boredom. He hates waiting, and he's convinced that intuition is better than rules. He's also the voice that says, just one more. You're due. Go big or go home. The magician, hyper-analytical, endlessly curious but rarely decisive. He studies, backtests, optimizes. He's always one indicator away from perfection, always building a better system, but never fully trusting it. The magician doesn't want to trade. He wants to understand everything. But in the heat of the market, his clarity dissolves into confusion, because for him, certainty is more important than action. The orphan, the wounded self, the one who never quite feels like they belong in the trading world. He doesn't trust himself, doesn't believe he's capable. He exits early to protect small profits because deep down he's afraid of losing anything. He tells himself, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just unlucky. This game wasn't made for people like me. But the truth is, he just hasn't healed yet. And here's the twist. You carry all of these archetypes inside you. None of them are wrong, none of them are bad, but each one has a different motivation, a different emotional agenda. Most traders think they're one person, but if you zoom out, you'll see your behavior shift from day to day, hour to hour, depending on which inner character is holding the mouse. Trading is not just a strategy game. It's a theater of identity. Every trade is an audition, and the version of you who wins the role determines the outcome. I worked with a trader named Simone. Her backtesting was flawless, her strategy clean, her warrior and magician were in perfect alignment until she went live. And then, the Orphan took over. She second-guessed entries, closed winners too soon, hesitated on perfect setups. When I asked what was happening, she said, "I don't trust myself anymore." But the truth was, she did trust herself. She just wasn't the one trading that day. Jung believed that wholeness comes not from becoming one thing, but from becoming aware of all your inner parts and learning when to call each one forward. Mark Douglas echoed this in his own way. You must learn to think from a probabilistic mindset, not from the emotional one. Translation: stop letting the fool trade when you're in drawdown. Stop letting the orphan manage your winners. Stop letting the magician trade during news events, and start bringing the warrior to the terminal, especially when it matters most. So how do you know which archetype is active? Start listening. Before you trade, pause and ask, who is sitting at the desk right now? What does this part of me want? Is it aligned with my edge or with my ego? Is this a trade or a performance? The market doesn't care who you think you are. It only responds to who you are being. And when you're unaware of the inner cast controlling your trades, you become the puppet, not the director. You react, you justify, you spiral. But when you see clearly, when you can name the inner player in charge, you get your power back. You can change the cast, you can shift the energy, you can say, "Thank you, fool, but I'll let the warrior take this one." Here's your practice. Each morning before you trade, no charts, no screens, close your eyes, breathe, and ask, which version of me is present today? And which one should be? Write it down, make it conscious, because the more conscious you become of these inner roles, the less control they have over you. You're not here to suppress your impulses, you're here to integrate them, to let each part be seen, but to choose which one leads. And when you become the director of your own internal cast, the chaos begins to quiet. The overtrading fades, the fear loosens its grip, and trading becomes clean again. So ask yourself, which archetype runs your worst trades? The fool, the orphan, the magician, and more importantly, who do you want trading for you next? Because you're not just trading setups, you're trading selves, and your job is to choose the right one. There is no craving more destructive to a trader than the need to be right. It doesn't arrive loudly like greed, it doesn't flood your chest like fear, it arrives quietly, respectably disguised as logic, dressed as conviction. It whispers, "You saw this first, you did the work, and you deserve to be right." And in that moment, your strategy no longer matters, because now it's personal. You stop managing risk, you move your stop, you hold through pain, you justify, dig in, and double down. Not because the trade still makes sense, but because being wrong feels like death. I've lived this. I once held a year USD position far past reason, ignored 3 exit signals, moved my stop twice, added to the loser. Not because I believed in the trade anymore, but because I couldn't stomach the idea of losing. It wasn't about profit, it was about identity. Because in that moment, my self-worth wasn't just connected to the trade, it was the trade. And when your sense of worth is on the line, you'll fight the market like it insulted your name. This is the need to be right. It doesn't come from strategy, it comes from ego, from a lifetime of believing that being right equals being safe, being wrongs, being weak, being wrong, being punished, or worse, being forgotten. Carl Jung described the ego as a mask, the part of us we construct to navigate the world. It wants to appear competent, in control, unshakable. But the market, it has no respect for masks. It strips them off, trade by trade, candle by candle, until you're left staring not at price, but at who you think you are. I coached a trader named David, ex-military, disciplined, tactically sharp, but when he lost a trade, he unraveled. He couldn't walk away. One red candle turned into 5. One bad day turned into a spiral. Not because he lacked skill, but because his identity couldn't tolerate being wrong. He grew up in a house where the only praise came from achievement: be the best, win, or don't come home. So every loss wasn't just a loss, it was a threat to his place in the world. And here's what most traders don't realize. The need to be right isn't about the chart, it's about your past. It's the kid who only got attention when he got straight A's, the teen who had to win to feel loved, the adult who still believes mistakes mean rejection. So now you hold a loser because losing feels like being invisible again. You refuse to exit because it reminds you of failure you never forgave. But the market isn't your parent. It's not here to judge you. It's just here to reflect you. Mark Douglas said, "The market doesn't reward the smartest, it rewards the most adaptable." But to be adaptable, you have to let go of being right. You have to surrender the identity that says, "I need to win or I'm nothing." That's not strategy. That's survival. And survival traders don't scale, they just suffer. Here's the irony. The more you need to be right, the more often you'll be wrong because you won't see clearly. You'll bend data, ignore risk, cherry pick setups. You'll stop asking, "Is this trade valid?" and start asking, "How can I prove I'm still smart?" That shift from curiosity to confirmation bias is where disaster begins. So what do? You practice humility, not weakness, not self-doubt, clarity. The humility to say, this setup failed, not because I'm a failure, but because this is a game of probability, and I don't control the outcome. That's the voice of the warrior, the one who can walk away from a loss without collapsing into shame. That's the voice of someone who's no longer trading to prove he's right, but to stay aligned with the process. You see, the ego wants to be right now, but the warrior wants to be right over time. The ego fights, the warrior adjusts, the ego spirals, the warrior breathes. And when the warrior loses, he doesn't make it mean something about who he is, he just moves on. So here's your practice. The next time you feel resistance to exiting a losing trade, ask yourself, is this decision based on my plan or my pride? What am I trying to protect right now? Am I still trading the market or defending my identity? Then go deeper. Ask yourself, where did I learn that being wrong is dangerous? What would it mean about me if I close this trade right now? Would I feel like a failure or like someone who just made a professional decision? Because that's the shift, that's the space between sabotage and sovereignty. You don't need to be right to win in this game. You need to be real. You need to see what part of you is afraid and give it permission to exist without taking control. You are not your last trade. You are not your red day. You are not your prediction. You are the one who sees all of that and chooses anyway. Because here's the ultimate paradox. The moment you stop needing to be right, you become more precise. You exit cleaner. You re-enter smarter. You lose without losing yourself. And that's when trading starts to feel light again. Not because you stopped losing, but because you stopped fighting yourself. Greed doesn't kick the door in. It doesn't scream. It whispers. At first, it looks like confidence, like momentum, like finally being on a winning streak. You're in flow. The market is speaking and you're listening. But then something shifts. Not on the chart, in you. A voice rises. Push it. Go bigger. You're leaving money on the table. What if this is your moment? And just like that, you've started the slide. The greed slide. It begins subtly. A little extra size. A skipped confirmation. One more trade you didn't plan for. Nothing dramatic, nothing reckless, just a gut call. But it's not your gut, it's your scarcity. Greed isn't about having too much, it's about feeling like you'll never have enough. Enough money, enough wins, enough validation, enough peace to finally exhale. Greed is a mask worn by the deepest parts of us that still believe we're running out of time, we're falling behind. We're losing the race we didn't even choose to run. I remember the exact moment I slid. I was up big that week. Smooth execution, everything by the book. But something inside whispered, this is your window. Make it count. You've waited too long. Take more. Don't just finish the week green. Finish it epic. So I went in again. Unplanned. Oversized. A setup I would have passed on just 24 hours before. And the market punished it. Hard. But it wasn't the red candle that hurt. It was what came after. I didn't stop. I couldn't, because now I wasn't just chasing profit, I was chasing redemption. And that's when I realized greed isn't a money problem, it's a self-worth problem. Mark Douglas wrote, greed causes traders to become dissatisfied with a trade that is already producing. That dissatisfaction, that's the root of the slide. Because when you're satisfied, you follow your rules, you protect your gains, you trade with dignity. But when you're dissatisfied, you chase, you force. You need the trade to do something for you emotionally, and that's when the slope gets slippery. I worked with a trader named Marcus. Calm, Systematic, built equity slowly, month over month, until he had his first five-figure day. The rush was electric, the praise rolled in, the dopamine soared, and then every future trade was held up to that standard. He couldn't go back to normal wins. They felt empty, pointless, too slow. So he pushed again and again, and by month's end, he was negative, not because the market changed, but because he had. The greed slide doesn't feel dangerous while you're on it. It feels justified because greed speaks the language of urgency. You don't know when you'll get another shot. This is how the big dogs trade. You're playing too small. Wake up. Others are getting ahead. It's always pushing you forward, but it never tells you where it ends. Here's what it doesn't tell you. It ends in self-betrayal, in breaking rules you swore you'd honor, in watching good gains vanish because they weren't good enough, in blowing up not from lack of skill, but from the illusion that this trade is the one that changes your life. But let's go deeper. Why does greed really show up? Because somewhere inside, you still believe that success will finally make you feel safe, that one big day will silence the doubts, that one monster trade will erase the past, that enough wins will finally let you rest. But here's the truth. No amount of money can heal what was never about money. Carl Jung said, man is not made whole by what he acquires, but by what he integrates. And when greed takes over, it's not integration, it's fragmentation. You're splitting off from the grounded version of yourself, the one who trades with purpose, who respects process, who lets profit come instead of grabbing it with both hands. So what do? You practice sufficiency, not mediocrity, not playing small, just enoughness. You ask, is this trade coming from clarity or craving? Do I want this trade to grow my account or my ego? If I made nothing today, would I still feel like a real trader? Because that's where freedom lives. In detachment, in patience, in remembering that the game isn't won by hitting home runs. It's won by staying in the game long enough to let your edge play out. You don't kill greed by force. You calm it with perspective. You remind it, I am not behind. I have time. This moment does not define me. I don't need to force success. I'm already becoming it. Here's your practice. After every big win, don't size up. Don't chase the sequel. Instead, journal. Write down exactly what went right, how it aligned with your system, what discipline led to that result. Then ask yourself, how do I honor this win, not inflate it? Because honoring a win means respecting the process that made it possible. Inflating it, that's the first step toward forgetting who you are. The greed slide only has power when you believe you're lacking, but you're not. You are capable, prepared, enough. You don't need a monster day. You need consistency. You need inner stillness that doesn't rise and fall with the chart. So the next time you hear that voice, double it, chase it, don't miss out. Take a breath, step back, and remember, the real trader isn't the one chasing more. It's the one who knows when to stop. There's a version of you that doesn't flinch, that doesn't chase, doesn't fear, doesn't cling. A part of you that sees every candle, every spike, every loss without reacting. It doesn't get angry. It doesn't celebrate. It just watches, silent, calm, unmoved. This is not detachment. It's not numbness. It's not cold, robotic execution. It's deeper. This is the observer self, the part of you that sees everything but doesn't become it. Most traders never meet this part of themselves. They live entirely inside their thoughts, their emotions, their impulses. They are the fear, they are the greed, they are the trade. And so when the trade fails, they fail. When they're wrong, they are wrong. When the chart moves against them, they move emotionally with it. But that isn't mastery, that's fusion. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The observer self is how you make that shift. It's the space between stimulus and reaction, the difference between feeling something and becoming it. And in trading, that space is where your power lives. I remember the first time I touched it. It wasn't during a win. It was after 3 consecutive losses. I was angry, frustrated, tense. My mouse hovered over a setup I knew was revenge. And then something strange happened. I paused, not because of discipline, not because of fear. I just noticed. I watched myself wanting to enter. I watched the urgency, the voice saying, fix it now. But I didn't act on it. Instead, I observed the urge. I sat in the discomfort, and then it passed. That was the first moment I wasn't the emotion. I was the one watching it. That's the observer self. It doesn't trade, it witnesses. And when it's awake, even your worst impulses become data. Most of your trading pain doesn't come from the market, it comes from fusion, being tangled up in your thoughts and emotions without realizing it. You think, I can't lose again, and believe it instantly. You feel, I need to get it back and act without hesitation. You doubt, I'm probably wrong again, and sabotage the next valid setup. But when the observer self is online, you hear those thoughts, you feel those emotions, but you don't obey them. You notice them and choose. That's where freedom begins. I worked with a trader named Eli, brilliant analyst. Deep emotional patterns. His biggest struggle? Every time he lost, he spiraled. It wasn't about the money, it was about meaning. To him, every red trade meant he was a fraud, that he was falling behind, that he'd never make it. Until one day, I asked him to journal not the trade, but his inner narrative. And that's when he saw it. The thoughts weren't true. They were just voices, stories his mind created under pressure. He didn't have to believe them. He could observe them. That awareness changed everything, because once you see the story, you don't have to live it. The observer self isn't magical. It doesn't erase your triggers. It doesn't make you emotionless. It just gives you space. Enough space to notice the pattern before you become it. Enough space to let the urge rise and fall. Enough space to ask, is this me or just a moment passing through me? Think about it. What if every time you felt the rush to overtrade, you could pause and see it instead of feed it? What if every voice that said you're failing was just static you didn't have to buy into? What if every emotional storm was just weather passing through your awareness instead of a storm you had to get caught in? That's what the observer offers. Not perfection, not control, but choice. Mark Douglas described this beautifully. When you truly accept the risk, you eliminate the emotional conflict that causes you to perceive the market from a fearful or euphoric perspective. But how do you accept the risk? You see it. You sit with it. You stop running from it. You let the observer self hold the discomfort instead of letting your inner child, your ego, your shadow react for you. Here's the paradox. The more you observe, the less control the emotion has. Not because it disappears, but because you stop believing it's you. You realize, I feel fear is not the same as I am fearful. I feel the urge to chase is not I must chase. That space, that sliver of self-awareness, that's your edge. So how do you cultivate it? Not in the heat of a losing streak, not during FOMC or CPI drops. You train it when nothing's at stake. Through journaling, not just trades, but states of mind, mindfulness meditation, breath work, honest self-inquiry. What am I feeling right now and where is it coming from? Each of these opens the door to the observer, and over time, it becomes a reflex. You pause, you watch, you choose, and trading becomes less like war and more like dance. Let me leave you with this. You are not your last trade. You are not your equity curve. You are not your worst habit. You are the awareness beneath it all. And the more you live from that place, that quiet stillness behind the noise, the less reactive, desperate, or chaotic your trading becomes. Because you're no longer trying to control the market, you're mastering your relationship to it. So the next time the urge comes to chase, to force, to prove, pause, and ask, can I watch this without becoming it? If you can, you've already won. What if your edge wasn't a system? What if it wasn't a strategy or a signal or a setup? What if your true edge was your wholeness? Not the smartest part of you, not the most disciplined part, not the one that wins, but the version of you where nothing is exiled, where fear is seen, where shame is heard, where doubt is held, not silenced, where you don't have to eliminate your emotions, you just no longer obey them. This is integration, the final step, the union of everything that was once scattered inside you. Most traders come to this world looking for tools, candles, indicators, backtests, entries. But what they're really searching for, whether they know it or not, is permission. Permission to feel safe, permission to grow, permission to win without betraying themselves. And that kind of permission doesn't come from the market. It comes from inner alignment, from no longer fighting against the parts of you that were hurt or scared or left out or punished for wanting too much. Carl Jung called it the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole integrated self, not a perfect self, not a sanitized, optimized trading machine, but a self that no longer fragments under pressure, a self that can hold fear and still move, a self that can feel shame and still act, a self that can experience doubt and not collapse. That's the final form of the trader's psychology. Not dominance, not suppression. Union. Think of all the voices we've explored. The inner child craving safety and permission to succeed. The fool chasing dopamine and fleeing boredom. The orphan, afraid of failure and not being enough. The magician, searching for perfect certainty. The warrior, calm, grounded, aligned with purpose. The archetypes, each with a role, each with a fear, each trying to protect you. Most traders try to silence these voices, push them down, trade like a robot. But that doesn't work, because whatever you suppress eventually finds a way to trade for you. Integration means no longer silencing these parts. It means seeing them, naming them, welcoming them home, and then saying, I get it. You're scared. You want to help, but I'm driving today. You can ride with me, but you don't get to grab the wheel. You stop being reactive. You stop chasing identity through your equity curve. You stop trying to earn love through wins or outrun shame with streaks. You become the eye in the storm, and from that still point, everything begins to change. I once asked a consistently profitable trader, what's the biggest shift that took you from break even to mastery? He didn't mention an indicator or a mentor or a specific trade. He said, I stopped needing to be someone else. I started trading from who I already was. That's integration, when your trading and your truth become the same voice. Mark Douglas taught us that successful trading is 80% psychology. But he didn't just mean discipline, he meant clarity of self, knowing when it's your edge and when it's your ego, knowing when the voice in your head is your shadow and when it's your strategy, knowing that success in the market isn't about never slipping, it's about seeing the slip as it begins and bringing yourself back with compassion, not shame. That's the paradox of mastery. It's not about becoming more, it's about becoming whole. And when you do, you stop forcing trades, you stop chasing highs, you stop needing the market to give you what you haven't given yourself. Here's what integration feels like. You follow your plan because it reflects your values. You size correctly because you respect your future. You walk away when it's time because you're no longer proving anything. You win and don't self-destruct. You lose and don't disappear into shame. You're not addicted to outcomes anymore. You're aligned with process. And from that place, you naturally become consistent. So how do you get there? It's not one moment. It's 100 small ones. It's journaling not just trades, but emotions. It's sitting in discomfort without needing it to end. It's watching a trade go red and not making it mean something about you. It's noticing when the inner child wants to click and placing your hand over the mouse and saying, not today. It's asking before every session, who am I bringing to the chart today? Am I trading to express trust or to escape a feeling? What does my system protect me from, and what does it hide from me? And it's letting the answers come without needing to fix anything right away. Just seeing. Because that's how healing begins. Let me leave you with this. You will never be completely free of fear. You will never be completely free of impulse, but you can be free of their control. You can build a system. You can train your body. You can clear your beliefs. You can choose moment by moment to return to yourself. That return is the real edge, because the best traders aren't just technically sharp. They're internally integrated. They don't trade from fear. They don't trade from fantasy. They trade from truth. So the next time you face the screen, before the entry, before the signal, before the move, ask yourself, am I whole right now? If the answer is yes, even in the smallest sense, you're ready. Because now, the trade isn't your identity, it's your expression. And that's the moment you stop chasing the market and start embodying the trader you were meant to become. You've made it to the end, not just the end of a video, but a journey into the hidden depths of your trading mind. If you resonated with even one of these insights, then you already know. Trading isn't just about markets, it's about mirrors. Every chart reflects something within you. Every impulse points to a story, and every trade is an invitation to evolve. You don't need another indicator. You don't need to trade harder. You need to meet the version of you who's been running the show all along, the orphan, the ego, the warrior, the shadow, the child, and bring them home, not with shame, but with clarity, with compassion. Because when you trade from a place of wholeness, you don't just perform better, you become free. So if this spoke to something in you, something deeper than setups and systems, I invite you to subscribe, not for tips, not for hype, but for truth. This channel is about trading as transformation, where psychology isn't a footnote, it's the whole map. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with the one trader you know who's been fighting battles no one else sees. Because the moment we bring light to the shadow, that's when the real trader shows up. I'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, trade with awareness, trade with presence, and above all, trade as who you really are.